we had not been recording. How into it, we hadn't
Can
recorded.
you start over?
Yeah, I don't think we've got time for that, but yeah, so AHIP as an ordinance creates incentives based off of criteria using our state density bonus. ED1 is a complementary ordinance that offers project streamlining.
Thank you. Well, you're still looking to get the map up. Jump down the question about the vehicle mile traveled and how that's determined.
Should we go in order, or do we want to jump around?
Well,
I want to make sure
I'd go in order, but you didn't have the map up for the next one.
I think we can answer it even with the map up. I know Erica's working on that, which is the next question is, what is the difference between low density and high density opportunity sites, and why are they so intermixed? And Erica, would you like to answer that one, or would it be helpful if I do that while you're working on pulling the maps up?
Yes, I can answer that. Sorry, it's just loading. But a low density site is a site where, given it's the zone that it is zoned. So for instance, I don't know, like RD2.
Maybe just say it's based off of the conditions today. So it's determined by what are the conditions on the ground today.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So if the zone or the site allows you to build less than 5 units based on the regulations of that site zone it's given, is considered a low density site. Low density meaning less than, it allows you to build less than 5 units today. It is without any incentive programs, its existing site. A high density site is a site that essentially the zones, the regulations today allow you to build greater than 5 units. And so, sorry, was there a question?
The question is why they're so intermixed. And the answer to that is it's dependent on how the zoning was put in place today. So they're intermixed because that's how the area was zoned. And some of it also has to do with the size of the sites, because the number of units you can build is based off of the size of the site itself. So larger lots next to smaller lots, you might see different outcomes because of that difference.
Okay, and on the screen is the AHIP map.
Is this the link? Was this the map?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Could you please zoom it a little?
How's this?
You have to zoom in a lot to see what we're talking about.
Zoom it a lot.
Okay. This is like the extent. I don't know if you want me to go.
Really not showing up on there even now. What we had was the, well, it does. See the kind of the patchwork of the light blue and the dark blue, and they're all zoned the same. But we'll just put that in our comments. That's okay. So vehicle miles traveled.
That's the green part.
How's that determined?
Yeah, so vehicle miles traveled is defined by state government code, specifically section 65915, subsection O, subsection 9. Basically, that definition calls a very low vehicle traveled area as an urbanized area as defined by the Census Bureau, where the existing residential development generates vehicle miles traveled per capita that's below 85% of either regional vehicle miles traveled. It's a long, lengthy.
You're gonna need a land use attorney, jeez, if they even know.
Well, the short answer is it's determined by the Southern California Association of Governments. It's a state definition, and the eligibility for use of that definition is determined by the Southern California Association of Governments.
It's the orange area.
How do you have vehicle miles travel for an area where no one has lived in the last 20 years?
So
They're now building housing in.
Their vehicle miles traveled is based off of two descriptors. One is whether it's regionally, so throughout the entire LA County region, or locally within the city boundaries. And, SCAG determines this based off of trips and the frequency of trips that are happening through their transportation modeling as part of their SoCal SCS modeling. Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
It's not the only thing that the green section delineates in the description off to the left that we can't see right now. It's vehicle miles traveled and also within a half a mile of a transit stop. And, we've measured these transit maps in San Pedro and we haven't found any that actually meet the requirements to qualify for those. So I'm assuming that most of these green areas are somehow based off of a vehicle miles traveled rather than the transit stop. But if they are based off the transit stop, they should probably be rethought because we don't have the frequency to justify that.
It's most likely, we can check what it is, but it's most likely the VMT threshold because pretty much the entire city qualifies as a low VMT area. There are some exceptions in the North Valley and deep in hillside areas, but it's the majority of the city is under that definition.
Yeah, and one of the biggest concerns is those orange areas, which are pretty much cover all of our parks. And I hope I interpreted this wrong, but it looks like they're the areas that they would want to put the 100% affordable projects. And I can't imagine that the plan would be to take away all our parks and put 100% affordable housing there. Please tell me that's not the plan.
I believe we're just showing sites that are publicly owned. So this map is just saying this is a site that's owned by a public agency, but we didn't remove sites that are like specifically parks, or we know like in order for a project to be built there, the agency would have to be willing to take parkland and build an affordable housing site, and that's very unlikely. This is just showing this is a publicly owned site.
And maybe to clarify, so if it is an open space, if it is a park, there are preclusions in the city charter from developing on them. So there's no likelihood that would occur. This was just identifying city-owned land. It's something that we're thinking about removing in the next iteration because we don't want to cause confusion.
What relevance is the city charter?
Sorry, what was that?
What relevance is the city charter provisions relating to parks?
There's a charter section. I don't have it off the top of my head that speaks to reducing of open space.
Well, I understand that, but state law has said that this is a matter of statewide concern, therefore the charter provisions don't apply. So why are you quoting the city charter?
Oh, I'm quoting it because we're creating an incentive to build housing on public land where it's not currently available to do so today. So we can define that incentive. The public facilities incentive is one that we have agency over to define how we want that to look as a city. So that's not state law doing it, it's a local policy intention.
So can affordable rental units be converted to affordable for sale units?
Not easily, frankly.
There's no provisions in any of this to allow that to happen.
They can choose to do for sale units as part of their development project. So like when they're applying, they can choose either for sale or for rent, and you can shift those around. But once someone has moved into a for rental unit, the covenant lengths of those units are extensive. So it is difficult. You have to fulfill that length of the covenant, whether that be 55 years, 99 years. That makes sense. So you can't, you could convert in the future, but for that period, my understanding, I've never heard of any project come back and try to switch it around. So, but once they're rented, once they're covenanted, it's pretty difficult to change that.
It's not like apartments that become condos.
Maybe in the future, once that covenant's expired, right? At the next step, it could happen, but not in the short-term life of the building. And I'm sorry, why don't we go back to our questions list? So there was a question about VMT. I think we've talked through that and the difference between high and low density being based off of existing zoning. There was someone raised the question about VMT and vacancy. I think we spoke to that. And then I think the next question was the definition of a major transit stop, Erica.
Yeah, so a major transit stop is a site where there's an existing rail transit station or a ferry terminal that's served by a bus or rail transit service, or the intersection of two major bus routes. And all of these have to have a frequency interval of 15 minutes or less during your morning or afternoon peak commute out periods. So that's a major transit stop. And I believe that's defined by.
Which we have none in San Pedro.
Correct.
So, go ahead. So the next one was if there was a map that showed the lower income rezoning sites.
Yeah, and the answer to that is no, we don't have that available yet.
So we're still
Um,
working on what sites may be identified for lower income rezoning, and that's something that we hope to have in the next draft. As Erica said, that's quickly approaching.
Next draft. Is there a definition of what qualifies as a faith-based organization?
Yeah, so the AHIP program aligns the faith-based organization definition with Senate Bill 4. The definition of a religious institution. And so it must be lawfully operating as a nonprofit religious corporation or corporation sole, as those are defined in Title I of the Corporations Code. So we're aligning with what state law defines as a faith-based organization.
And is there a particular time that they have to have been in existence before they're eligible to develop housing?
I don't believe so, but Blair, could you confirm? Yeah.
No, there's not a specific, they don't have to have been a religious organization for a specified period of time. They are required to partner with a nonprofit housing developer like Habitat for Humanity or one of the other many nonprofit registered tax code developers in the city in order to do a development, though. So they can't just, it's difficult for them to do it just alone. They would need to have that partnership as part of their program.
And so are they also required to keep it for the 55 or 99 years?
Yeah, so we're proposing 99 years in our program, 55 is today. And then for a faith-based program, based off the feedback we've heard from LA Voice and other faith-based advocacy groups, LA Voice is a coalition of different multicultural faith institutions. Sorry?
So they would be required to maintain, to keep it for that long?
They're required to keep them. We're proposing 99 years. And for faith-based institutions, we're requiring only 80% of the units be affordable versus 100. And that's to allow for 20% of the units to be, distributed across, that faith-based institutions needs. So that was a specific request from faith-based institutions. If they want to have, a parishioner in their congregation live in that unit, if it's affordable, they can't guarantee that those persons, someone who lives locally, can go into those units. There's requirements about access from the state, so that 20% of the units are at their discretion.
So what happens if the faith-based organization ceases to exist?
Covenants would still exist, and that's again why they have a nonprofit housing provider partner. So the units wouldn't disappear because they're obligated legally to maintain those covenants.
Are they allowed to sell it?
Not in my understanding. I think there's been some uncertainty in the state law, and that's something we're looking to clarify in the next round of our ordinance.
So the next one, actually, I'm going to let Elise ask it because it's really yours.
I'm going to piggyback super quickly on that same topic. Right now, the current state law says that you have to be a faith-based organization prior to January of this year. So there's an effort to remove that restriction, and almost makes it like anybody could suddenly become a faith-based organization and then sort of team up with one of these housing groups. I think it's very important that the January 1st, 2024 got to be a faith-based organization prior to that remain part of the law, because otherwise it seems like it could be almost like a Wild West loophole for people to kind of jump on and be like, yeah, I'm a faith-based organization, so let's do it and get all these incentives. Like at any time, there has to be some kind of an established track record of being a faith-based organization prior to being able to get these incentives.
Got it. Yeah, I think we've heard some concerns about, so in the state bill, as before there's an acquisition date, you have to own the property before a specific date. We didn't include that based off of feedback we heard from the faith-based communities wanting to be able to acquire parcels. You know, a lot of the feedback we've collected over the last course of a couple of months really is focused on concern about acquisition of single family properties particularly. And that's something we've definitely heard and we're evaluating as we come to our next draft. The other thing to keep in mind is that these ordinances don't get touched very often. So as we're writing these laws and creating a tool, we want to make sure that it's a tool that exists for the city again in 10 years, right? As you know, if there is potentially a new organization or 501c3, you know, 10 years from now, when they maybe are looking for a new home, that there's some flexibility for them, but in the right places where people want to see development. And so that's something that it's helpful to hear concerns about that as well.
Okay, Dinah, did you want me to go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay, so Western Avenue is shown as an opportunity corridor, yet it has virtually no transit and very few jobs. Pacific Avenue seems to be designated for 100% affordable housing. Pacific Avenue is more appropriate for an opportunity corridor, as this is the only place in San Pedro that has real transit and access to good jobs. Furthermore, incentivizing 100% affordable housing does nothing to affirmatively further fair housing in this area, while incentivizing mixed-use housing does. How can we get this changed? And Pacific Avenue is a corridor that we've really been focusing on. It's a potential Jedi zone, and there's a lot of opportunity, we believe, for mixed-use housing development along Pacific to really help bring that corridor back to life. And so it's just an area of focus for us.
Yeah, so I
Is there-
believe,
go ahead.
I have yeah, I believe Western Avenue, it has an LA DOT dash bus that meets the opportunity corridor and transit service.
Not according to some of our riders, where it can take them like 40 minutes to get to downtown San Pedro from Western Avenue if the dash bus isn't running in an efficient manner. But I just know that, I know there's opportunity zones on Western, I get that. But if we have opportunities like Pacific Avenue that meet a variety of needs, is it possible to prioritize that over Western Avenue?
Yeah. Erica, I'm happy to jump in.
Okay.
That's helpful. Yeah. So Pacific Avenue is not included in the higher opportunity area definition, which is why it wasn't identified as a high opportunity corridor. That doesn't mean that the program doesn't offer tools for Pacific Avenue. So what we're looking at right now is AHIP, which is 100% affordable incentives. Generally speaking, properties that are eligible for AHIP are also eligible for our state density bonus program. So these properties are eligible for mixed income incentives and not exclusively 100% affordable incentives. They're eligible for both.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they are eligible today, I should clarify. So this is not a change. This is just identifying what is already eligible for incentives in state law today. I hope that answers your question. And I think the next question relates again to the covenant length. So it's concerned about unintended consequences of increasing affordability covenants from 55 to 99 years, and questions about, has anyone else done this? Are there studies about the impact on housing development? Erica, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so this change from 55 to 99 years was made primarily to align with requests to extend covenant lengths from some of the other cities, like the other recently adopted community plans the city has been working on, including downtown LA and Hollywood. And so there was a study conducted in coordination with LA Housing Department for the Hollywood Community Plan that found that extending the covenant length citywide to 99 years would not have a major effect on housing production. I think there's also a UCLA study that also found something similar.
And
And-
there's one caveat with this requirement. So the 99-year doesn't apply to projects that are publicly financed and subsidized. And that's because the federal government, says specifically it has to be 55 years in their way that they structure their grant programs for affordable housing developers. So there's a little bit of a carve out for some 100% affordables, but for market rate developers or mixed income developers, that's the 99 years would apply.
Yeah. And in terms of other jurisdictions, I think we found that kind of like nationally, the 99-year or even like in perpetuity covenants are more common, but within California, locally, Santa Monica City has recently begun to require the 99-year covenant. So that might be the direction that other cities in California may be going in as well.
I think you answered the next one, which had to do with the parkland. So San Pedro has a number of, this one has to do with your opportunity transition areas. San Pedro has a number of duplexes and triplexes that actually fit very well into the community and they're quite charming. But what design guidelines or other methods will be in place to ensure that the new development continues to reflect the character of our community?
Yeah, so I think of all the new programs that we're introducing, the corridor transition area, or like what we're really aiming for, like lower density typologies, missing middle typologies, like you just described, the duplexes and triplexes, they're all required to meet these certain design requirements in order to utilize the program. And so we're requiring you to pick from a menu of options to ensure that every project has common open space, providing a courtyard or per se, or like a common yard, because we find that that's an important part of these types of typologies, and part of what makes them like a nice place to live and that kind of like charming I guess like neighborhood that you described, as well as requiring street entry features. So porch, forecourt, there'll be a menu of there's a menu proposed of different types of entry features that a project could select to ensure they have that relationship with the street, to maintain that kind of design aspect that a lot of people really like about these like historic, more in the past types of housing that have been created. And then also ensuring that if any units are facing the street, that the door or the entrance to that unit is facing the street as well.
And in addition to those requirements, frontage requirements in the new zoning code will also apply. So if, as the community plan is moving forward, if there are specific, roof typologies that are proposed as part of a character frontage or something along those lines, or encroachment planes, I know there's lots of cool tools in the new zoning code, those would still exist. So we have some basic framework, but there are opportunities in the community plan that Elise and others are working on to get a little bit more fine-tuned.
And they won't be able to waive those requirements?
Not in this transition area. We've tried really to keep, these being very designed forward. We really wanted to recreate missing middle. So this is the most like restrictive of the requirements. We actually reduce your height allowances and your FAR allowances to utilize this program. So for instance, in R2 today, you can build 3-to-1, which is 3 stories, basically full build out 3 stories. We're saying in our program, actually, you might be maxed out at 2, depending on how far you are from the corridor. And we're only going to let you to have FAR that's 2-to-1. So we're giving you less FAR than you would have had before. So your building bulk will be smaller too.
And the next question had to do with the opportunity corridors, where no parking is required. We know that residents will continue to have cars. We know that from our own experiences in downtown San Pedro here. Where do you anticipate people will park?
Yeah, great question. I think basically we're still, this is not like a ban on parking. Developers will likely provide parking according to what's marketable for them. And so we're lifting the ratio so that there's flexibility for a developer to provide the parking that they think that they can rent out the unit or sell the unit at. So I don't think that we'll see projects not provide any parking. Maybe some will if it makes sense for them, but we're not saying you cannot provide any parking at all. We're just leaving it up to the market and the developers.
And like, in fact, we had a meeting just 2 days ago, or was that last week, with AIA and ULI, and we talked about this sort of topic at length, and what they shared is that they can't get funding to build a project unless they provide the parking. So even though we're saying it's not required, consistent with state law, state law has been really regulatory for parking. There's a market-based need for them to be able to rent out these units that leads to them building parking often. And we've seen that in our TOC projects and other projects too in the city that don't have parking. Even in areas like right next to a transit station where we want to see, a major transit station, as we were talking about earlier, we want to see less parking. People are still building it, right? And so that's something that, we all sort of weather with on, how much parking we really need.
Say something, Louise?
No, I know we have one new 100% affordable development that has come into downtown San Pedro with no parking. And we had talked to the developers about tap cards or encouraging to lease to residents that did not own vehicles and that were dependent upon public transportation. That is not transpiring. Tenants are moving in with cars, and now they're asking the council office to remove parking meters, waive parking tickets, extend hours because they're all parking in a commercial area with meters, and it's causing an issue for the businesses in the neighborhood. I'm a total housing advocate. I've been promoting housing construction for 20 years, but as a chamber, in my work with the chamber, but we are starting to see some of these impacts that we were not expecting in commercial zones. We're seeing residents who are opting not to pay the additional parking fee and market rate developments. So they're parking on the street in commercial zones. So they're not paying another $65 to $85 a month to park in the market rate building, or the parking's more convenient on the street versus the parking structure that's coming with their building. We actually have a parking study that the council office is working with LADOT on and the community to address some of these issues that we're facing. So we are seeing some of that. So it's something that we hope you'll take into consideration when you're looking at some of these conditions and waivers, et cetera.
Yeah, we'll definitely take a look. As I mentioned, we're really limited from the state standpoint.
I agree. We're just, with this parking study, we're trying to look at out of the box flexible options on how we're going to address it.
Oh yeah, I know that's really, and a lot of cities have done really interesting stuff. Obviously, that's not the scope of our work program. That's more localized, but obviously Pasadena, Santa Monica have done some really interesting parking programs that help alleviate some of the constraints. So I'm sorry it's frustrating.
No, I mean, it's just a reality. It's not that it's frustrating. It's just we have to figure out how to work out some of the issues that we're facing.
The next question had to do with the density bonus program, and for properties eligible under the state density bonus program, how are the properties outside of the TOIA selected? And do they get the same incentives as properties in the TOIA? Unfortunately, the person asking that question isn't here tonight.
I think we jumped to, because the next question I see is, how are low market tier and medium market tiers defined?
Okay, I don't see it, but go ahead. Oh, that up above earlier, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so low market tiers and medium market tiers, basically we're following the structure that's used in what's called the affordable housing linkage fee. That's a fee for all projects that are building residential or commercial that have to pay into a fee that goes into like a fund to provide more affordable units, affordable housing. And so that study broke up the city into what they call market tiers, and a market tier is basically kind of like the strength of the strength of the rental market in that area and the for sale market prices. And so low market tiers are generally areas of the city where there's lower for rental costs and also lower for sale costs. And then a high market tier would be an area where there's higher like rental and for sale costs. And the idea is that if you're in a higher market tier, potentially there's ability for projects in that area to provide more affordable units within their projects, because they can offset them with with greater rental prices that are currently in that area, in that neighborhood. Does that answer that question?
And I think the question is like, how do we relate this to San Pedro, right? So, you know, today in linkage fee market tiers, San Pedro is a low residential market, which means that it's the lower affordability set when you're looking at that table in the ordinance.
I think we were a medium market when it came to commercial property, right?
Yeah, commercial is higher, and that again is the residential is lower because there's been less residential production in the area, so there's less, you know, newer rents to compare, right? So over time, if San Pedro was to become a stronger market, then you could ask for higher affordability. So that's going to adjust, and that's one thing that's a little different about our ordinance compared to past ones, is as that market strength changes in a neighborhood, our affordability requirements will adjust to that change. So they could actually go up in San Pedro's case.
So I think then that got us to that density bonus question.
So the next one was state law on park. We talked about that. How many additional units would the proposed changes enable? It depends on each site. It really varies. And then the next one is about population loss.
Oh, yeah, we skipped the density bonus question.
Did I don't see it.
Okay,
Is
well,
that your general question?
I'll read his question. For properties eligible under the state density program, how are the properties outside of the TOIA selected? And did they get the same incentives as properties in the TOIA?
Oh, I see it. Thank you, Erica.
Yeah, so basically for that map, we just wanted to show, because currently you can be a site that's eligible for state density bonus and TOC or TOIA as well. So state density bonus basically says if you can build 5 units at your base, you're eligible. If you're a multifamily or a commercial property, you can build 5 units at your base with your existing regulations. You're eligible for incentives. And then kind of overlaying that as a local city is what we're proposing as TOIA, the transit oriented incentive, saying you can, if you're located within a certain radius of a transit stop, and you can build 5 units, then you're eligible for other incentives. So like it's possible for a site to be eligible for both. And in that map, we were just showing state density bonus that is not within a TOIA area. So it's not within a transit area. So you would only be eligible for state density bonus.
So, and I think the question is more about like, how did properties get picked for each, right? And, you know, for state density bonus, those are properties that are already eligible for state density bonus today. We're just identifying sites that today can utilize programs. So it's not changing the eligibility for properties that are eligible for state density bonus. It's just showing them on a map. The TOIA is again showing properties near transit or that are within a transit zone. So there are many properties in San Pedro that are eligible for state density bonus, but that are not eligible for the transit incentives in MIP or for the opportunity corridors incentive in MIP. So if they were going to use a program, they would need to use the state density bonus program. We're not proposing any additional intensification on those beyond what the state already did.
Yeah, then the next question was the one on how many additional units would the proposed changes enable? I think that question is meaning citywide. How many additional?
No, for San Pedro.
For San Pedro.
Yeah, I don't have that specific number. It's really going to depend on how the program, you know, ordinance sort of is effectuated. It also depends on how you measure it. So, you know, many things like state density bonus already exist today. So, you know, we're not really proposing a change to those units within the MIP and the TOIA program. As those are being refined, then we'll have a better idea of where our numbers are.
you have a range in mind? Give us
We're
some
trying
sense.
to hit our minimum is what we're trying to do. So we have to hit at least 255,000, as Erica said at the top of this, and at least 140,000 for lower income sites. So that's our task at hand, is to make sure we hit those minimums.
Yeah, but if you just applied it to San Pedro, what would the number be?
I don't know. Yeah, we don't have a specific neighborhood goal. Again, we're looking at the priorities that Erica outlined related to opportunity corridors and transit. So the numbers vary, based off of those two factors. And so we don't have like a specific target for each community plan area or a specific neighborhood. There's nothing along those lines. It's really a citywide goal.
If I calculate correctly, our local community plan already would have been about 16,700 additional units in San Pedro. I take it, it says, why don't you just take this program and apply it to those properties so that those become opportunity sites for the present owners? It's already zoned.
So again, it's based off of state methodology for identifying opportunity zones. So we can't create a new definition for it. We're following what the state has set out before us. And then we're identifying specific programs or sites within those areas. But the community plan work is happening alongside it. Generally what we're proposing for the San Pedro area, we're proposing a lot, like there are very few opportunity corridors in, say, San Pedro compared to many other opportunity neighborhoods in the city. And that's, as you guys have mentioned, because there's not as much transit, right? Most of our programs are transit based. So if you look at Mid-City or the West Side, we've got a lot more opportunity corridor centralized. But that isn't to say that the community plan can't come in and do more. And focus on those areas you want to see, like Pacific Avenues. We're just sort of a blunt citywide tool, and you can come in and obviously do more in your local planning efforts.
Do we have many more questions?
We do have more, but okay, we don't have to keep asking them. I mean,
I don't know what's up wrong with you. I don't know.
So there's no opportunity corridors, or not as much here. That means not as much affordable housing will be built here. Is that what I'm
I
hearing?
mean, we don't have the core, if you look at the map,
Right.
we don't have that many corridors actually that are
And
highlighted.
that's,
if you look at
We're
this
good.
map that's showing the 100%,
It's very confusing to me personally.
This
we don't have transit. So another good reason not to have transit.
That's what we designed, local community plan,
These are
additional
additional
incentive
incentive
programs.
programs.
encourage
Alongside
some
the
transit.
So.
Yeah.
So
it's
yeah,
never
in
gonna happen.
terms of the MIP program, there's not a lot of application in San Pedro. There's not a lot of sites that are really eligible for it. It's pretty limited. There are sites that are eligible for density bonus that are already eligible today. So again, not a change, but there is opportunity. There's opportunity through your local community plan that you've been working through. Obviously, you've put opportunity on the ground already through the
Mhm.
work that happened a few years ago. There still is continued opportunity if you'd like to see housing in more places.
What happens if the city does not if enough builders do not wish to invest in these projects? What happens?
Great question. So there's two sort of thresholds. The first is, what happens if we don't get this program adopted? That's the first what if, right? I don't know if you're asking that question or if you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. If we don't meet this deadline, if we don't make this rezoning program adopted with all of the numbers we need by February 2025, something is triggered called a builder's remedy. If you Google it.
Yeah.
We know all about that.
Okay, you know all about it. So we don't want it, right? In Santa Monica.
No.
In Santa Monica, they've got R2, which is a duplex zone that went to, I think, 11 stories, if I'm remembering
Yeah.
correctly, in a duplex zone. That's what happens with a builder remedy. So we don't want to be in that position. So that's one consequence. Second consequence, we lose funding to a bunch of programs at the state level. That means money that's coming in to build affordable housing, we are no longer eligible as a city. Also, private developers or nonprofit developers aren't eligible for it either. So it really is unfair to them. They get in trouble because we as a city didn't do our job, right? There are also court-imposed fines that can happen to us. And in the worst case scenario, which we're starting to see unfold in some other cities in Southern California, actually, the state can take control. They can say, you don't know how to plan Los Angeles. We're going to plan for you. And our department up in Sacramento is going to do your local planning for you.
I know. I mean, we need to get it done in my opinion.
But if the builders can't get financing, I mean, there's a lot of issues that if we have a
So that's-
recession,
That's the first hurdle. So the first hurdle is getting our program adopted. The second question, which I think is where your question was coming from, is what happens if no one builds? What happens if, we've got these best laid plans and they're not to be fulfilled? Our job is to show that we're doing everything we can to try to make this housing happen. And we hope that it will. We're doing an economic analysis. We're talking to builders. We're talking to developers. We're trying to make sure our program is something that's attractive enough that it's actually going to work and cause the change that we need in the city. So housing is more accessible. But we then also have to repeat the same exercise that we've done as the housing element of identifying what's going to be built, starting in 2029. So we're about halfway through our housing element cycle right now. We have to look at all of the things that we've set up again in 2029 and see what we need to do to make housing more feasible once again. So the work doesn't stop. We're basically always asking these questions.
So are there any other burning questions that didn't get asked? I know we're almost out of time with them.
The term pipeline housing units, how is that defined? And then how is that associated with certificates of occupancy?
A good question. You mean in regards to our reporting for the state and in regards to turning our numbers and in what aspect?
This is part of your housing element plan, and it has to do with table 2.2.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So that housing element pipeline, as part of the housing element on probably the second or third slide, Erica showed. We looked at our goal plus a buffer about 480,000. Then we anticipated what development would occur. So we looked at, citywide, what we thought might happen, including projects that we already knew were in the pipeline. So this anticipated development number. So those are projects that have applied for a building permit and were in progress. So not all of them had certificate of occupancies, but they were through, they were actively moving through the building permit process. And so they contributed to this 230,000 production number.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Any other burning questions? Can you send me a copy of your presentation so we can share it?
Sure, yeah, I'll email it over to Diana. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
And I saw in the questions, there were quite a few questions about, how our program relates to the new zoning code. I don't know if it would be helpful to speak to that a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so our ordinance, we actually have two versions of it. So one's going to live in our current code and be applicable based off of existing regulations. And the second version of it's going to live in the new code and will offer bonuses based off of the new proposed zones that are put in place. So you can treat it as sort of a base and a bonus system that's a little bit more transparent. So today it's not clear for every parcel what the maximum building volume you'll be able to access is. In the new zoning code, you'll be able to see that articulated through kind of the 2.0 version of our ordinance. And so it'll complement kind of local planning efforts. I understand that there hasn't been a bonus program proposed for San Pedro. So in the new code, I think the density bonus program would be the main program. So it would be accessed in the same way.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I will thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for hanging in with us and spending the time with us and helping clarify a lot of things. And we certainly had questions about.
And added more.
Yeah, those Robin hasn't asked anyone.
So thank you.
All right.
I had one more quick thing, just a comment. And thank you for coming out and giving the presentation. We really appreciate that and know this is kind of like a work in progress. But you mentioned a couple of things about the community plans that we've worked so hard on with the city, and you were talking about the transitional zones and how it was important to transition from these more dense zones to the single family zones and to pay attention to that and where the restrictions were made in order to be able to do that. And you mentioned porches and, these kinds of things. San Pedro is one of those destination places that people go to. It's not like a city that's in the middle of a freeway that's already there. You have to kind of intend to come to San Pedro. And, just a couple of things. We've got the oldest lighthouse in California in Point Fermin Park. The canned tuna industry started here. San Pedro has deep, deep, deep maritime roots and a maritime heritage. It's probably the highest Croatian population outside of Croatia. It's got huge Italian immigrant population. It's a real melting pot. And so much of our architecture and our heritage and the style and the feel of the town is what makes it so unique and makes it such a destination. And from the Kozilek perspective, a special coastal community. That said, we have run into, unfortunately, many situations where the requirements and the suggestions in our community plan that we worked so hard for were thrown out the window because developers came in and grabbed some on-menu incentives like the kinds that you were talking about, and then just handed in a bunch of off-menu incentives. And, the City Planning Commission goes, yeah, sure, rubber stamp. And so all of a sudden, things that were worked on slavishly for years and years and years with the community and the city just get thrown out the window in a single hearing. And listening to you, it sounded like you think those kinds of things are important to follow. But in our real world experience, we've seen just the opposite happen. And when you have such a deep, rich maritime heritage of our town, for example, being replaced with like a bunch of sort of cookie cutter urban infill projects that have no personality at all, it's not going to take long before everything that makes San Pedro special just sort of disappears. And maybe you've got like, 2 or 3 blocks left as a historical preservation overlay zone that, this is what it used to be, and everything else is not. And if you could sort of figure out a way to really make sure that when our housing needs are expanded and met, that they're met in a way that keeps all of what I'm saying in mind so that we don't lose what's special about San Pedro. It's so important, and it doesn't seem like people who are doing the building really care.
No, I really appreciate that. I mean, a sense of place is so essential to community, right? I'm maybe a little biased. I worked in the Office of Historic Resources for 6 years. So I didn't actually get to work on Banning Park or any of the San Pedro HPOZs, but I do understand the concern. And I think as we're opening up ordinances like this, it's helpful for us to understand too, what are the things that you've seen in your community, these waiver requests that have been so upsetting? If there's something you can share about, the types of requests that you think are unmerited for the financial feasibility of development, that's helpful for us. Because oh, you're on mute. But am I not making sense?
Sorry, would that be blair.smith@lacity.org?
That is me. Or housing element, if you want everyone to see it. It's hard when one person gets it, then we're all forwarding all the time. So if you can do it to housing element at LA City, then we'll all see it, which is really helpful. But if there's waiver requests that you're not happy with, it's helpful for us to know that, right? Because we're setting up these regulations.
We'll be happy.
I think we're a blunt tool, this ordinance, right? As I keep saying that. But community planning does have opportunity to incorporate these things. And I appreciate that you guys have spent a lot of time in San Pedro developing a community plan and now doing it all over again, like in the same decade. Like, I can't even imagine the amount of hours you guys have put in. So I do want to uplift that. But if there's anything you could share, we're happy to take a look. We want to make an ordinance that works for the city.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be happy to help.
I did have one more question. You mentioned a couple of times that there'd be another draft out. If I understood right, when are you anticipating that?
Next month.
Next month?
Yeah. So we're moving pretty quickly. We're aiming for a new draft next month. We're still going through comments right now, so we're getting a lot, right? And so we have to get through those comments and then put them in place. And then there will also be, so there'll be draft next, public hearing after that, depending on when the draft gets out. We want to make sure there's enough notice. And then we're aiming for a city planning commission in either August or September. So moving to our 3rd draft around that time.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll say good night. Thank you for
Good
being
night.
flexible and understanding that we had to get out of here. I've got a sick husband and a sick baby, so I have to go.
You got a brand new baby, don't you? Blair?
I do. My baby's only 5.5 months, so I gotta
5.5 already, wow.
Aw. Yeah.
yeah, I gotta
Thank
go be on
you.
duty.
That's so fast.
Yeah. Thank you
So
so
I
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
doing this
understanding. and
tonight.
Appreciate you guys spending your evening
Oh
with
my
us tonight.
goodness.
So
Thank you, Bob.
You,
Okay. Appreciate it. I know. Baby's gonna be up by it.
That gets us to any comments that we think we want to make.
I think I'm more confused now
Than you
than
were.
than I was with their previous presentation. I feel like we need a land use attorney to walk us through
Yeah,
this.
it is extremely complex.
I don't know how this is streamlined. I just,
But it's the bottom line that we're really not gonna be as impacted as
We're
any
not.
other communities.
and the
We should be
financing
happy about.
issue's huge, you
Oh,
know.
fine.
So in talking to our people that do to,
Yeah.
you know, to the point of the pipeline, they're on hold because they can't, their
Well,
financing isn't
You
there. and-
remember that in the past, builders have gone under with great regularity.
Yeah.
Back to the eight, if anyone
Yeah.
can remember, back to the 80s, 2008, many. And what if we have another strike or they can't get the building material? I mean, there's this huge amount of variables
Yep.
that I think the state will, accommodate. This is reality.
Well, I think that I was really disappointed in their answers because I don't think they really answered
You know,
many things.
I agree, Pat, and Diana, I'm wondering if we ask next time for the questions to be answered in writing. I'm a visual learner, that's part of my problem anyway, but I don't know, it just didn't work for me.
It wasn't a very good
And
presentation.
everything they were saying, which also helped.
Pardon, Rock?
It wasn't a very good presentation.
No, it wasn't.
You're talking underneath, you're not projecting, you can't read the slide, you
Right.
don't know what they're talking about. It should be very quick and to the point,
Yeah.
bang, bang, bang. And, just not droning on with all these.
Yeah, that's what I said, I'm more confused than ever, so.
Yeah, so Blair, I thought Blair was pretty smart.
Blair's good.
She's smart, yeah.
You know, I think if it could have just been Blair giving a more concise presentation and maybe getting the questions back in writing, I think that would have been awesome.
The structure and approach of planning in the state has really changed in our local things that we're used to for the last 30 or 40 years are impacted greatly. That kind of fluidity requires some, I'll say basic honesty on their part and some reflection. I think the points that Noel was making about the character of our community are affected by these things.
Yeah.
So
But I just want to, and Noel, your points were very well made, but here, I work with an organization that's countywide, and every community feels they're special. Eagle
yes.
Rock, Highland Park.
Every
Mid-City.
community.
Well, I mean, I lived in Eagle Rock for years. You talk about an incredible housing stock, historic housing stock. So I hear you, but I'm wondering how we can frame it, because I'm sure every community says to them, we're special. We
Only
have
one community has the oldest lighthouse in California.
No, I agree. I don't want to tune us out because I know every neighbor.
Absolutely.
I don't think, personally, I don't think what we're seeing built really impacts whatever. I mean, to me, what's hurting is the projects 50 years ago.
Right.
Okay, and then the tearing down of single family residences to put up fourplexes and stuff, which was 30 years ago, that's impacting more.
Yeah, I agree.
than
That was.
putting up essentially affordable apartments in downtown San Pedro. I don't see a problem with that at all.
I think maybe what if we did this? What if we took the outlet, because what does we want our community to be? We want it to be walkable, we want people to be, connected to San Pedro. And I mean, a lot of the work that's been done on on Sixth Street and what we try to do on Pacific Avenue in a variety of ways. We should really try to get those preserved in whatever they're doing.
But Sixth Street is very walkable. I sit there all the dang time and it's amazing.
It's connected. We gotta make it connected. So the new projects, the new stuff of the projects, we want to go north and south as well as east and west. We want to connect to the waterfront, tie to the waterfront. We want all those things. I think we can do it maybe with these new rules. I'm not sure exactly how. But I gotta tell you, in past work that I did, we had a sociologist that came and said that Los Angeles is really a collection of 105 distinct communities.
Yeah.
And if you say that you're from Silver Lake, people know automatically what your politics are, what your sexual orientation is, a lot of things about you, right? That's not bad. I don't.
No, you need characters.
It also says I can't travel to other communities.
No comments are well taken. Our history started in 1542. Not too many communities go that far back, and we have a unique history.
We do.
Replete with many different facets that are completely ignored, even in West Harvard today. I wrote a letter to them, from under the auspices of the Historical Society saying, yeah, you can come here in San Pedro, but you get a nice veneer, a superficial feel of it, but there's no substance. Where's the substance that would really create some kind of enjoyment of this area, some kind of knowledge-based, that people could take back with them? But his comments are well taken.
No, they are. I just don't want to be tuned out because I know the planning department. I'm just trying to figure out how to present them in a way we don't get tuned out, because I know I agree 100% with you.
And I agree with you, I'm a visual learner too, and I have hearing problems too, and I'm trying to focus in, and my eyes are getting blurry and my head's getting heavy. I need to see it. I would like to see the questions beforehand too.
See the first building down there in the waterfront now? I mean, now they got the sides in, whatever.
It's gonna be
It's gorgeous.
It's gonna be beautiful.
We're not just talking about downtown. Everybody seems, may I? Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
Yes.
It just, but we're talking about all of San Pedro, and we're also talking about our children, the people that live here. When they were talking about building Ponte Vista, as you can recall, they were talking about workforce housing.
Right.
Now we don't hear those words.
A great
We don't hear-
waste of land in my.
We don't hear anything about, okay, my son's living in Wilmington and my daughter's living in Charlottesville, because they've been told they can't live here. And when we talk about all this stuff, we're not talking about, and we're not saying to them, is any of this going to be reserved for people that live here? When we do affordable housing and they put the levels, they say, this, that, another thing. We were talking about, if you go to the homeless committee, we were talking about, we have homeless here, but they move in first come, first serve. What about the homeless that live here? We want them off the street. And this is the same thing. We want our children to have it. And when we talk to these things, this is the thing that I don't see. When we talk about preserving, the community stuff, I can tell you, I know as well as you all know that the moment they saw an opportunity, they tore down streets in San Pedro, left, right, and center, because they said, oh, we're going to build this, and we're going to build that. We used to have a beautiful Carnegie library, and you can name all sorts of stuff, but all that stuff disappears. But what has never disappeared before, and which is disappearing now, is the community, is the next generation.
Getting older and dying off, Craig.
Well, you're right. They say the missing workforce housing component, the teacher married to the new firefighter. You're exactly right. You're hitting the right buttons. I just don't know. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Most everything that's being built are rentals. There's very few things being built that you can
Which is
actually
more affordable.
purchase.
That was part of the,
Well,
has been the question about could you take the affordable units?
Right, and do
affordable
some
for sale?
affordable home ownership,
Yes.
which is something that we're all trying to figure out.
But that's not what's being built.
I know.
They could incentivize that in
Mhm.
here.
Wasn't there something about there was a reason they had about a 10-year policy and they could flip it from?
It was
It's a
on.
liability.
Yeah, the
Yeah, 10
insurance
years liability,
liability,
the
yeah.
contractor, the construction, that's
But
why.
I know
all
we're
the-
talking about it at the state level on how to incentivize affordable home ownership and what to do with the building community on this insurance issue with the 10 years. That's why a lot of the developers are saying we're not building condos.
I don't
Oh, they
know,
haven't
that's a
built
problem.
condos in
Everybody's
decades.
talking about affordable housing. It's easier to rent something than buy a condo.
Well, there's
But
no
Rob, they're
condo.
talking about stabilizing communities through home ownership. I'm a renter, okay, I love it. I chose to rent, okay? So, but there's a path, there, how do you get a path forward to keep our young, our young generation in the community through?
Because they can
affordable-
afford renting apartments better than buying
So
condo.
my son moved to
There's no
Tulsa and bought a
condo.
condo for $65,000 cash. He said, Mom, I'm never coming back to LA. Breaks my heart. Is there a path forward for affordable homes in the future?
No. I mean, really, no. I mean, it's gonna keep going up. We've had people come to the meeting, when we're in City Hall, saying, please approve the stuff on Pacific. So my daughter can live in San Pedro so she can rent an apartment instead of being forced to buy a condo. So I never sort of understood. it.
There's
So we're-
no force to buy a condo
I know.
when they're selling at $900,000.
That's what he said, though. That's what I'm the feedback.
I'm just like-
And nothing new.
Right, and nothing, I mean, we get
Except the
calls
one
into the
project
chamber
on
that are,
Crescent.
people are looking for condos, new condo developments. It's a way into home
Too much
ownership.
liability on the builders.
It's cheaper to buy a condo than it's to buy a
Yeah.
house usually.
No, but it's cheaper to rent an apartment than buy a.
Correct, but if you want to rent while you save for your first home condo, duplex or condos are a cheaper method to achieving home ownership in a single family home, which somebody may never be able to afford.
Yeah, I know, but it's still, again, I don't understand this affordable thing.
Okay, hold on, Pat.
What?
I called on Pat.
Let's, can we talk about, writing up something to submit to the planning department?
Yeah, what kind of comments would people like to put in there? And I had some draft ideas, but what would people like to say in the comments? That was the question.
Well, perhaps this is one of about 5 or 6 that were really good.
Mhm.
At least that. I don't know, I want to see something about connecting people to the community. Through the, you know,
And I get, and Noel's comments about character, design, if there's, but I need to go back and look at this again.
It's more
'cause I'm-
expensive
Can
to
we do
design.
this?
Yes.
It's tight.
let me ask this
We already
question,
have-
in this group here, how many people want to see better public transportation in San Pedro?
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's.
I mean, it's a given. I just don't know. We're not on anybody's priority list.
We've gone over this, Pat, a bunch of times
Yeah.
with all these programs.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't talk to Metro. And Metro goes, we don't talk to those guys, and they don't ever have a joint plan.
Well,
You know,
our,
I just watched this great little mini documentary about Helsinki had this problem of very car-centric, roads clogged, they couldn't get anywhere. And they built the transit first. Everyone said, oh, you're building a train to nowhere. There's not enough ridership. It doesn't merit the density of that. But they built this thing, built this train line out to their extended suburbs, which would be just like San Pedro. And what they did differently was they made their bus lines feed to the stations. They made a priority of feeding all the bus lines to the mainline station. And so they made the transfer super efficient. The bus could pull up, get up the bus and boom, and you're on the Metro like in minutes. And they ran like every 5 minutes. And people, they have the highest percentage of people not owning cars in the major metropolitan area. It's like higher than like Denmark and Amsterdam, in Copenhagen, higher than that in Helsinki. Because they made it just efficient to get on a bus, and the bus network fed into the main transit, they got on the transit, went to downtown or whatever, and got on, efficiently could move around.
Well, I still think we should say something about it in a letter, then if it's something that's important to us.
yeah, I
It
think
is.
so.
But how does it add to the character? Are you still there, Noel?
I'm here, yeah. Just
How does-
off to the side. By the way, I started recording this about 11 minutes or so before we did. So if anybody wants it, I can send it if we need to listen to
Well,
it.
how does an increase of a better designed public transportation system for San Pedro add to the character or preserve the character of the community?
It
Well,
just
if
get
you
more.
really want to, if you really want to trigger Jason, you can start by talking about how they ripped out the red line.
Red line.
We know that.
Oh, we gotta talk about purchasing more rubber tire trolleys to add to a flexible networking system.
Fantastic.
First of all, you got to get some, if you
Favorite
want, if you want to have adequate transportation, you need to have, some train that makes it down here that's not stopping at Harbor Gateway. And we definitely don't have enough bus service. And, you've got the West Harbor development and all this other kind of stuff. It's one of the big issues is that there's not enough public transportation. It would be great for people to want to be able to come down for whatever happens down here to visit that and concerts or whatever, and to be able to take public transportation to get all the way down here rather than having to come down in cars, because even without the development even open right now, and during rush hour when you start to come down to San Pedro and then you feed off toward the Harbor Boulevard exit and you come into Gaffey Street, it's a big parking lot, and that's without the development there. So when you start factoring in 7:30 shows and all this other kind of stuff, and you're going to amplify the traffic coming into town by orders of magnitude and also many hours earlier. And we don't have any kind of a real public transportation infrastructure to be able to support that. And until we do, it's going to be really tough.
The comments that we want to put in, whatever comments we put together.
Just for the record, watch this weekend and see if we have any problems during Fleet Week. We've not had any problems the last 2 seasons.
And I agree, and I work in the info booth and I've been through all the meetings, but they're bringing in dozens of shuttles. And they're renting shuttle buses that people are gonna park at 22nd Harbor and they're shuttling them right into the venue. It's a really slick system, and they're adding in the red trolley to come through downtown and
They
circle.
were rolling today.
Cycle people through. But that's why in our connectivity plan, PAIP letter to the port, we said we need more rubber tire trolleys purchased by the port to add to this flexible networking system that can run through the area. And Craig, to your point, I'd love to see more. We have cruise ship passengers that want to get to Western. I'd love to see that dash, more money put into the dash system.
Well,
and really
the whole point is we're looking at things and most of the stuff like even, the trolleys, which is downtown centric. We need a whole.
I agree.
And the problem is when we're talking to this, we're specifically including what we really need, which is housing for our children, transportation. Okay, West Harbor is West Harbor, but it's not going to make my life any better.
It will,
It won't make my kids' life any better.
according to, well, I'm not going
No.
Tangent now.
No, but
The question is, what comments do we want to make back to the planning department about this initiative? This,
Well, talking about the housing and affordable to buy. If they could incorporate some of that in this
Yeah,
plan,
that would be amazing.
some percentage that would be.
Well, one thing we have to do is really pay close attention, because we've seen it before. We spent, like I was saying, decades working on the community plan with the city, and then you can see aspects of the community plan that we worked on very, very hard, and they can be thrown out in an instant. And so we have to watch this process also, because even though they say one thing, it might not turn out that that's actually what happens. And the only way to have any chance at mitigating that or guiding it or steering it in the direction that's going to be most helpful for us is if we're on it constantly. And then when we see things that look like they might be deviating, jump on that as soon as possible to be able to let people know that we see it and that that's not what they said. And we need to really kind of push it in this direction. That's because that's what our community needs. Nobody knows more about what our community needs than us, and especially people who are directly involved in our local planning. Everybody in this room, everybody on Zoom, we're an important part of the process. And then we're like kind of the center that goes out and collects more information from other people. And there's always a balance, there's there's a balance that you want to strike. We're all people, we're all trying to get things done, and people have different opinions, people agree. You know, the most important thing is to just realize that we're all human, and we're all trying to do things that are ultimately, I think, beneficial, and work together to keep our town the way that moving in the direction that we want to keep it moving. You know, there's always going to be disagreements, there's always going to be agreements, but we need to just work together. And when there are larger outside forces that see our town as one gigantic opportunity zone, with the primary end game being profit oriented rather than community oriented, we just need to pay very close attention and make sure that what's happening is going to be beneficial to us who live here and love this place.
Linda.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is the one about having affordable to rent to buy or some process. The other thing I'm hearing about transportation, this is not, because if they're gonna put affordable housing here, how are those people gonna get to work?
Right.
And particularly, which building doesn't have any parking?
It's the one adjacent to the Harbor Community Clinic across, it's on Grand. It was,
Oh, yeah.
and there was an understanding that now I'm getting this from secondhand, but I'm gonna research this, that there was supposed to be priority given to people that did not have cars. And it appears, we don't know what happened with that. The management company is saying they signed a document saying that they knew there was no parking attached to the building. There was a priority given to people that needed public transit. But there's this situation now in that neighborhood, and they're calling the residents are calling the council office for relief. We want the parking meters taken care of.
Those are two questions.
those
There are two comments that I think seem to be really
Can they
important.
interact with DOT or whatever
What if we had a fleet of
city?
old Priuses running around? And
You gotta get rid of your Prius?
well,
Uber.
I've only got 47 miles.
It is, yeah.
I'm not gonna get rid of it yet. But some of the basic things that we need are like rides to Sixth Street Hospital, to the medical centers, and to Kaiser, and to the market, and to schools and things like that. And I'll have coffee with Jason and see if we can.
It's been done though, with Uber.
Yeah, it's called Uber.
Uber is a little difficult.
Tom.
One thing I'd like to see, it's already been mentioned by others, and Diana, you asked the question, about their maps are predicated on a certain frequency of public transportation, which doesn't exist here. But what I thought I heard her answer was, well, but all of LA is considered that, so it doesn't matter. And I really think we should highlight.
That was a vehicle mile trips. That was not the public transit.
Oh, okay, I wasn't answering that. So I got lost in the presentation at some point. So then it's still, we don't have the regular enough transit. And I'm wondering, I haven't been in this group for very long, but I spent about an hour during commencement with Stephanie Wiggins, who's CEO of LA Metro, and was just talking about San Pedro. She didn't seem informed at all. She thought it'd be a great idea, because I was thinking of you, Elise, why don't we have some way for people to go from the airport to the cruise terminals, right? And with the Olympics, it's like, oh, these are great ideas, because she had never considered them as the leader of LA Metro. So
Did you get her card? I think we should have her down for a round table.
We had our gowns, but I'm sure we can get her information.
Let's do it. And because I think to Jason's point is that it's the chicken or the egg, and that's what Metro keeps telling us. You don't have the ridership. West Harbor might be our hook. But yeah, that's a great idea. And maybe we can work with some of the other Metro folks.
And to Pat's point, the things that I learned is Toyota just gave the university a bunch of money for electric cars for these short-term trips for our students who need to get groceries and things because the bus doesn't work there. And she did commit with a lot of advocacy. She's building a new transit center at Dominguez Hills. So I do think interacting with her and her team, if we keep pressuring and work with the council member,
let's do it.
We could maybe then make this work for us.
And a lot of those transit problems are the way we actually structure our transit. We have to make sure there's enough population there first with documented trips by car to replace it with train. And what's being shown that has been done in Europe
which has been done in Helsinki, as I just mentioned, also in Paris. They're building in a neighborhood, they build the transit first, and then it just all fills in. But we wait till it's painful, it sucks, traffic's terrible, and then we try to bolt transit back into it when it's harder to build stuff because now it's full of cars and houses and lack of right of ways, right?
We can't justify transit unless we have enough people there. And then you get more people if you build the transit. So we kind of went backwards. But at least the new place that's on 9th Street between 8th and 9th, that affordable apartment building, does that one have parking too, or is that one also without parking?
It has parking.
Okay.
Oh, on the Link Housing, they do have quite a bit of parking, and they actually replaced the number of spaces that were in the public parking lot so they could service the retail on Pacific Avenue. I toured that building. That was very well done by Link. It really was. But they had a lot of
back and forth for a while. I wasn't sure how it ended up.
Yeah, no, they had a lot of community input on that development, and it's really beautiful.
I have a feeling that the other one that was done though by Sola, the other one, the one up on 3rd or 4th, I think it also may not have.
Yeah, I
parking.
don't think behind the tattoo parlor, I think that's another one.
Without
And those,
parking.
unfortunately, we don't see come through.
No,
So-
never by right projects.
So going back to my original thing, one of the questions we need to ask them is how do we get units that are being built made available to local occupancy? For locals to occupy?
So this is a question we ask a lot, and those of you that are more experienced, I get fair housing. It's said back to me, if I know if there's public funds in the development, you cannot restrict those units to people that currently live in the community. Goes to your point, first come, first serve, and we've asked this, and we need to continue.
Yeah, but how do we get our people to be first in line?
I don't think we
Not
can.
say,
Discriminatory.
Yeah, I don't, according to the fair housing law and discrimination laws, or anti-discrimination laws, I don't. You can't, yeah. it's-
unless we ask for, it, we won't.
That was the only thing that's been.
Right, and there's a,
Evicted and they.
Not gonna happen.
right, yeah, there's a special program for that, you're exactly right.
I did put together a number of potential comments ahead of time and I sent them out and I haven't heard any feedback to them. They were in a couple of different areas. One was some specific corrections to the maps. And I'm thinking that just based on what we heard tonight, that one of our comments should be that they should actually remove the parks or show the parks as open space rather than showing them just as government, that they might to change, to request an actual change to the maps.
They said they were.
Doing that, they're working on that.
We should make sure to do it.
To make that comment.
Agree.
I don't think I saw this, what you're talking about, but
I sent it out part of the last meeting. When we had them and then we finished the meeting. Then there was a group on the transit and I'm hoping that Jason will actually help write some of that. There are a couple of comments on the 100% affordable housing. But I think they answered the one question. The question of, but the other one was maybe that it shouldn't apply to substandard streets. Because we start putting up a lot of units on streets where we already can't hardly drive down them.
Yeah.
Then there were some very specific ones on the housing incentive program ordinance. One was that they should be amended to allow affordable rentals to be converted into affordable for sale units. That the faith-based strategy should limit it to land purchase before January 1st, 2024. Except for land that's actually immediately adjacent.
In case they need to
Yeah,
add.
because that seemed to be the driving force. To include they have in here an idea of a density bonus for land donations, but they don't say how much density you could. And so
It's going to be up to the developer asking for on menu and off menu entitlements, just like the current density bonus. So it won't be kind of be the sky's the limit. And just the understanding between.
So the comment was that they should put a maximum on that, is what the comment was.
So
They'll put a maximum and then they'll take it to the city planning commission. They'll ask for off menu entitlements that go above and beyond the maximum and the CPC will grant them.
So you don't think we should even make that as a comment?
No, I think we should make it as a comment, but I'm just saying from experience, that's what's likely to happen if a developer wants.
Yeah, for-
Jason?
It's on the faith-based thing, rather than fixed state, as she mentioned, they want to use the same policies 10 years from now. You might want to have it like, they must have owned the property for at least 2 years or 3 years before applying for the bonus.
Yes.
Exactly,
May
because otherwise
I?
people, they're just gonna
Based
go
on
out and
what
buy
they
it and say
said,
they're.
Thanks for
faith-based.
reminding me, but
Hold on, we could only have one person at a time, and the next person who had her hand up was actually Adele.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The two representatives from the planning department, are they specializing just in our area? Or are these women expected to know everything going on in the entire?
This is a citywide.
Citywide, so they have to really know every single little community and big community? Well, that's quite a task.
This
What
whole
they
thing
built
was
out
quite a
is,
task.
what they built out is not based on feeling the community, it's looking at the numbers. Here's what transits, these
Right.
streets are this
Oh.
wide, these are the zones, bam, bam, bam.
Yeah,
That's it.
but to
It's all
be
done by map.
familiar with the details and the.
They don't,
streets,
they're not looking about that.
They're not.
I think that's
The
part of the
details of
problem.
the streets are all in Zemus or whatever, that's all in there.
Yes.
The quality of the street, how big it is, if it's substandard, all that
Right.
stuff's in there. They're just looking at that, saying, this street qualifies for this.
Okay.
this Here, so then this applies. It's just a simple math formula, like the.
So they just
That's it.
started with the top and worked their way down to us?
They, well,
Or who
they
knows?
went
No, they're
citywide,
going, yeah.
the whole city has been
We,
done. this way.
Diana has just been great at getting them to meetings.
Yeah, I guess it's very impressive. Thank you.
Those are Saturday mornings and planning meetings, too, citywide meetings.
Okay.
okay. So based on the thing with the faith-based, they were able to get 20% reserve for their own uses. We can, why can't we? That doesn't say, they were able to do it, so that means it's doable. So we need to say, we want to see that a certain percentage is reserved first for locals, one way or another. If they can do it, we can do it.
So we'll put that in the comments. Add that.
And if that isn't possible, then we need to be talking to the faith-based developments and see if they'll put a priority on it for locals.
Or we just start the Church of St. Pedro, we're one big faith here.
There you go.
Exactly. You know what Craig's saying right there, it's
That
like,
sounds fishy.
the Blair said that it was at the faith-based institution's discretion. But are they bound by the affordability requirements, or is it just like, oh, the pastor wants an affordable place,
You know,
so.
it was 80, it was
He's gonna live
80-20,
there. He's
right?
gonna live there.
20% for their use and 80% affordable.
Yeah, 80% minimum.
But many
affordable.
clergy are at the affordable housing level,
Oh,
so
absolutely.
yeah,
The
so,
nuns for sure,
right, exactly.
the low income.
So
Not exactly how you think it is, but that's another story.
the
Except
next
the
one,
ones that fly the jets.
the next one I suggested was, they have a definition for frequent bus service, but it doesn't include the weekends.
Yeah.
And I think if you're gonna have frequent bus service, you've got to include the weekends,
Mhm.
because otherwise you're gonna leave the residents stranded, so. there's
And just
suggestion
Yeah, you
that they
could.
add,
Yeah.
that include the weekends. Suggestion also that they have a language that says regarding the base incentives along fixed bus routes within a half mile of fixed bus route that operates, they say at least 8 times per day. That's all they were requiring. And my suggestion was that they say at least hourly between 6 and 8, 6 a.m. and 8 p.m., 7 days a week. To be.
Well, that requirement for 15 minutes, every 15 minutes used to be the requirement to qualify for a TOC, transit-oriented community. Now they've added this every 30-minute one, which is not really adequate to get people to and from work during rush hour.
Right, well, and then they've added this other one that only requires 8 times a day for affordable housing.
Yes.
100% affordable housing, which makes no sense.
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to Western, we have, you know, our buses that run on there, and then PV has their buses that run on there. And we already know that PV wants to use Western as their.
And their buses don't run on weekends.
Their buses are basically designed to get their kids to and from school.
Except for the one that goes to San Pedro Hospital. But other than that, they're all designed to go to school. And then I thought that they should place a maximum on the additional height from public benefits. Right now, there's like 7 different public benefits, and for most of them, you would get another 11 feet. So if you had 5 of them, you would get 55 more feet, so I'm suggesting that maybe 33 more feet, not.
Yeah.
And then there's some comments on the coastal zone, which I think were things that Noel wrote.
Okay.
So those were, and then the things that we incorporate what I've heard here. If anyone has any other comments, you can send them to me. Northwest will be meeting, we're gonna have a special meeting because if we wait until our regular meeting, it would be after the board meeting. So we'll have a special meeting the first Wednesday of June. We'll do it all on Zoom and to approve comments. And I don't know what how the other two want to approach it.
Robin, can we be a part of a coalition a coalition letter maybe, Diana? Or do we all need to, you guys are the experts at this, go back to each individual?
We have to go back to each individual board.
But then maybe if we take a draft letter and sign on as a coalition rather than 3 separate letters?
Sure, you can do that, and you can also write your own and then say we also
Yes.
subscribe to, what this other
Right.
council did.
I didn't know if we wanted to write our own, Robin, or sign on to what's drafted.
I'm happy to just sign on for this because I don't see it, a motion is needed to approve questions we're asking. If we were making statements or asking for changes, that's different.
Okay, so this is the letter that's gonna be asking these questions and making suggestions, right?
It's a comment letter.
It's a comment letter.
Oh, well, then we should go back, yeah. I thought it was just questions.
But time is of the essence, Robin. They need this by your June board meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, well, even if it ends up being the same from all three after we've all worked on it, it's probably going to incorporate everybody's input ultimately, but it has to go back to each board to be approved.
And so if anyone had any additional comments, I was suggesting they send them to me and I'll add them to what I've got. The things that we talked about.
They didn't answer the question well about eating Coastal Act kind of thing. They're like, oh, I asked them, I kept pressing, well, which agency is the one who makes the final decision on whether I think they were calling them waivers, whether a waiver was granted. And then she came back with, well, that'd be the City Planning Commission. The City Planning Commission has no jurisdiction whatsoever over the California Coastal Commission. And if you're harmonizing the Coastal Act with whatever act it is that we're talking about here, whether it's the density bonus law or the housing element or whatever it is, that requires a very close working of the city with the Coastal Commission and finding out. And the Coastal Act is abundantly clear. If there
are draft comments.
If there are areas of conflict,
No.
the Coastal Act supersedes.
No, there are draft comments that I think you wrote primarily on the Coastal Act. So just take a look at those and see if you need to amend them.
And then Diana, you'll insert them into the letter.
Yeah. If anyone has anything else they want to insert the letter, let me know. Other than that, I think we're
Public comment.
public comment.
Lost line.
We had somebody wanting to make a public comment, but he didn't stick around.
You got tarts.
Any no public comment?
It was a good meeting.
I just wish the presentation had been tighter, more concise. But
I agree.
I've seen this in several processes, and they're training.
That's what I think you're right.
Yeah, they're always
That's
training.
why you're not seeing it as tight, because I've seen it in all these presentations, the least. And that's why, I don't remember, the last thing was Smith, from our first one. That's why she kept breaking in, because, and I think we're gonna have to put up with this, because we do need the training.
It's important to be trained, that's right.
When I commented on good meeting, I meant that all of us were very focused and attentive and pretty much on the same page regarding these issues.
A lot of people had submitted questions ahead of time to try to shape what we heard. Adele?
For the next meeting, do you go over the current projects and around town? Seems like we have more than I suspected stalled projects. So updates and.
Well, all the dirt lots, they're stalled.
Yeah.
I mean,
And they can put a little machinery and pretend they're working on it when we know they're not.
They've been stalled since 1545.
No, and I.
42.
Any specific
Yeah.
ones
It's closed.
about send me the.
Okay, I will.
What that have to do is we have the council office.
Well,
Yeah.
but I think.
Building code.
One
If it's
meeting,
of-
one
if it's
meeting.
of interest.
Just a minute, Jason.
Oh,
Just a
go
minute,
ahead, Jason.
Jason.
What, was it these two planners that we met with at some point in the past where they talked about design guidelines and we showed some pictures of some of those things?
No,
Who was
that
that?
was the person that's actually working on taking out, taking our existing plan and putting it into the new zoning code.
Okay,
And I think she's kind of waiting for this to work through. Because somehow this will also get incorporated into the new zoning code, if I understand right.
because the design guidelines, we had some pretty good
Mhm,
conversation
yeah.
about that, which would
Yeah.
cover some of what Noel was asking.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's, it's like coming out of different
So
parts of planning and how
confusing.
they're working
Yeah.
together and.
Okay,
But if it's of interest, one of our real estate developers, Bill Cockrum, who's doing the courthouse development, he is willing to come and talk to community members about what's happening in the finance world, why these projects are stalled, what they're faced with, how they're trying to fill gaps on some of these projects. It was. he
So
has-
we have him at the next meeting?
I'll ask him, I'll see what his schedule is, because, I mean,
That would be
it's Pastor Lisa's church. They had a housing development plan that's stalled, they can't get funding.
They may just have had a breakthrough, I'm told.
Yeah,
May have had a breakthrough.
The problem is tax credits. You have 8% and 4%. At one point in time, you could easily get 4%. Now there's a 2-year waiting period.
right, that's one of the things he was talking about for the
That'd
affordable
be very
developers.
interesting.
Diana, if they have a breakthrough, I'm so happy.
Yeah, but one of the members of the church told me they think they have a breakthrough on it.
But yes, you're totally correct. It is part of the project. But he offered to do it if we think.
Would you guys like to have him?
I would love to hear, yeah. He's easy to understand. He's very communicative.
He's very, articulate.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've been wondering what's happening with the courthouse.
There's another one that's like going where.
Yeah, well,
They're trying to fill a gap. They have a financing gap, yeah.
The site is a gap too in the flow of people up and down the street too. 'Cause it's-
Yes.
yeah.
The boutique hotel.
That one is, we've talked to them too. That's a long-term project. They will not be starting anytime soon. We have a secret weapon, Alex Valente, who is the lead for Trammell Crow on the 5th and Harbor. These developers will return his calls. So I'm like, Alex, call the boutique hotel people, find out what's happening. So he's been calling on very specific projects. So yeah, we can get that information.
And Alex is the one that's working on the green onion.
They're doing their due diligence. Yeah, on that project.
okay, I think with that, the meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Holland isn't involved with that project anymore?
No, they are selling.